As the tributes stand on their podiums, the horn sounds. John Quincy Adams stays at the cornucopia for resources. James Monroe runs away from the cornucopia. Bill Clinton and Warren G. Harding fight for a bag. Warren G. Harding gives up and retreats. Joe Biden finds a bow, some arrows, and a quiver. William Howard Taft runs away from the cornucopia. John Tyler takes a sickle from inside the
John
cornucopia.
Titor?
Tyler.
Oh, unfortunate.
Why would John Titor be a fucking
Dude,
president?
Time travel.
As a woman?
Rigged the election. Actually, yeah, you know what? That's a good point. She could not pull that off.
Andrew Johnson runs away from the cornucopia. Grover Cleveland grabs a backpack and retreats. Millard Fillmore runs away from the cornucopia. Benjamin Harrison sets an explosive off, killing Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and James Madison. Damn,
Dude,
he just
that's
did
a
us
dub.
a favor.
Yeah.
That is a dub.
That's awesome. I don't know who that guy is, but damn.
Benjamin Harrison, look him up.
Alright, let's see if this guy's good or not.
Alright, and while you're at it, Franklin Pierce runs away from the cornucopia. George Washington grabs a sword. Chester Alan Arthur, Martin Van Buren, Ulysses S. Grant, and Jimmy Carter share everything they gathered before running. Benjamin Franklin runs away from the cornucopia. Dwight D. Eisenhower gathers as much food as he can. Lee Harvey
He married
Oswald
his
finds-
niece.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Lee Harvey Oswald finds a canteen full of water. Woodrow Wilson runs away from the cornucopia. James A. Garfield runs away from the cornucopia. Herbert Hoover finds a bag full of explosives. William McKinley grabs a jar of fishing bait while James Knox Polk gets fishing gear. Rutherford B. Hayes runs away from the cornucopia. Harry S. Truman grabs a backpack and retreats. Barack Obama takes a spear from inside the cornucopia. Thomas Jefferson runs away from the cornucopia. William Henry Harrison gathers as much food as he can. Gerald Ford gathers as much food as he can. Donald Trump clutches a first aid kit and runs away. George H.W. Bush runs away from the cornucopia. John Wilkes Booth gathers as much food as he can. Theodore Roosevelt runs away from the cornucopia. Andrew Jackson grabs a shield leaning on the cornucopia. Zachary Taylor runs away from the cornucopia. Lyndon B. Johnson snatches a pair of sais. John Adams runs away with a lighter and some rope. John F. Kennedy finds a backpack full of camping equipment. Calvin Coolidge runs away from the cornucopia. James Buchanan runs away from the cornucopia. George W. Bush falls into a pit and dies. Based. Abraham Lincoln falls into a frozen lake and drowns.
Oh, rip. The only significant things about Benjamin Harrison, besides that, is that he was the shortest, term, because he died in office.
Oh,
And that's it.
cool.
Oh, he died on his 32nd day. He was president for a month.
Wow.
That's awesome.
He did. Just
Barely
elected
made the
this guy.
list.
Hey, this guy looks pretty cool, and then he just dies.
Dies. Yep.
Millard Fillmore and Andrew Johnson hunt for other tributes. Warren G. Harding tries to spearfish with a trident. James Monroe defeats Franklin Pierce in a fight but spares his life. Calvin Coolidge fishes. Joe Biden scares Lyndon B. Johnson off. How? Harry S. Truman fishes. Gerald Ford stalks James A. Garfield. They're all old, Gavin.
Is Andrew Garfield still alive? I mean Jackson. I said the wrong one.
Andrew Garfield. He's not in this.
Yeah, I know. He's British. Is Andrew Jackson still alive?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Donald Trump defeats William Howard Taft in a fight that spares his life. Grover Cleveland receives clean water from an unknown sponsor. Woodrow Wilson injures himself. Chester Alan Arthur scares Jimmy Carter off. Benjamin Franklin defeats John Adams in a fight that spares his life.
Good.
James Knox Polk injures himself. Martin Van Buren receives clean water from an unknown sponsor. Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson hunt for other tributes. George H.W. Bush receives fresh food from an unknown sponsor. John F. Kennedy injures himself. Lee Harvey Oswald, Herbert Hoover, Bill Clinton, William McKinley, and Zachary Taylor hunt for other tributes. Theodore Roosevelt fishes. George Washington explores the arena. Barack Obama tends to Dwight D. Eisenhower's wounds. William Henry Harrison travels to higher ground. Ulysses S. Grant overhears John Tyler and Benjamin Harrison talking in the distance. Rutherford B. Hayes fishes. John Wilkes Booth is unable to convince John Quincy Adams to not kill him. Okay, so one assassin down.
Yep.
James Buchanan receives clean water from an unknown sponsor. Alright, so Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Franklin D. Roosevelt, James Madison, George W. Bush, Abraham Lincoln, and John Wilkes Booth are dead.
Oh wait, I got it wrong. Benjamin Harrison wasn't the one who died. It was the other Harrison, Henry or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, he served for a month and then died. Benjamin Harrison literally didn't do anything.
Except married his niece.
Yeah.
Anyways, William McKinley thinks about winning. George H.W. Bush cooks his food before putting the fire out. Andrew Johnson, Theodore Roosevelt, George Washington, Lyndon B. Johnson, and James Knox Polk sleep in shifts. Jimmy Carter, Ulysses S. Grant, Joe Biden, and Benjamin Franklin tell each other ghost stories to lighten the mood. Warren G. Harding receives a hatchet from an unknown sponsor. Herbert Hoover is unable to start a fire and sleeps without warmth. Chester Alan Arthur convinces James Monroe to snuggle with him.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy poisons John Adams' drink, but
No.
mistakes it for his own and dies.
No. I mean, that's good.
Don't worry, John Adams is still
is
alive.
better. Yeah.
Gerald Ford, Calvin Coolidge, Martin Van Buren, William Howard Taft, and James A. Garfield sleep in shifts. Andrew Jackson and Millard Fillmore huddle for warmth. Thomas Jefferson dies of dysentery.
Good.
William Henry Harrison receives fresh food from an unknown sponsor. Dwight D. Eisenhower and Grover Cleveland talk about the tributes still alive. Benjamin Harrison, Donald Trump, Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Pierce tell each other ghost stories to lighten the mood.
Whoa.
John Quincy Adams and Harry S. Truman sleep in shifts. Bill Clinton and Lee Harvey Oswald talk about the tributes still alive. Okay. John Tyler is awoken by nightmares. Zachary Taylor tries to sing himself to sleep. Rutherford B. Hayes and Barack Obama hold hands. James Buchanan tends to his wounds. Benjamin Harrison shoots a poisonous blow dart into William Howard Taft's neck, slowly killing him. Millard Fillmore and James Knox Polk hunt for other tributes. Rutherford B. Hayes explores the arena. Warren G. Harding travels to higher ground. Theodore Roosevelt begs for Herbert Hoover to kill him. He refuses, keeping Theodore Roosevelt alive. James Monroe runs away from Grover Cleveland. John Adams, George Washington, Lyndon B. Johnson, Jimmy Carter, and Lee Harvey Oswald hunt for other tributes. Calvin Coolidge discovers a river. James A. Garfield begs for Benjamin Franklin to kill him. He refuses, keeping James A. Garfield alive. Joe Biden is pricked by thorns while picking berries. Ulysses S. Grant discovers a river. Barack Obama attacks Bill Clinton, but he manages to escape. Zachary Taylor sees smoke rising in the distance, but decides not to investigate. Martin Van Buren chases Harry S. Truman. Chester Alan Arthur collects fruit from a tree. Dwight D. Eisenhower searches for firewood. George H.W. Bush searches for a water source. William McKinley sees smoke rising in the distance, but decides not to investigate. Andrew Jackson receives fresh food from the United States of America. Franklin Pierce, Donald Trump, and Gerald Ford get into a fight. Donald Trump triumphantly kills them both.
Of course he
Okay.
does.
Andrew Jackson makes a slingshot. James Buchanan throws a knife into William Henry Harrison's chest.
Damn.
John Quincy Adams practices his archery. Woodrow Wilson and John Tyler work together for the day. So John F. Kennedy, Thomas Jefferson, William Howard Taft, Franklin Pierce, Gerald Ford, and William Henry Harrison are dead.
Yes.
Lyndon B. Johnson goes to sleep. Zachary Taylor stays awake all night. Warren G. Harding bashes Martin Van Buren's head against a rock several times. Ulysses S. Grant tries to sing himself to sleep. Grover Cleveland stays awake all night. James Buchanan starts a fire. Millard Fillmore tends to Bill Clinton's wounds. Benjamin Franklin, James Monroe, and Chester Alan Arthur sleep in shifts. George H.W. Bush receives clean water from the United States of America. Andrew Jackson cooks his food before putting his fire out. Herbert Hoover is awoken by nightmares. Joe Biden and George Washington tell stories about themselves to each other.
Very cool.
The first president and the current president talking.
Yep.
James A. Garfield sets up camp for the night. Andrew Johnson and Theodore Roosevelt tell stories about themselves to each other. Benjamin Harrison is awoken by nightmares. Harry S. Truman looks at this night sky. Calvin Coolidge and James Knox Polk tell stories about themselves to each other. John Adams tries to sing himself to sleep. Rutherford B. Hayes questions his sanity. John Tyler and William McKinley huddle for warmth. Donald Trump loses sight of where he is. He cannot find Trump Tower anymore. Woodrow Wilson, John Quincy Adams, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Lee Harvey Oswald track down and kill Jimmy Carter.
Rest in peace.
Wow. They got 3 presidents and an assassin to kill another president.
Yep.
Barack Obama sees a fire but stays hidden. James Monroe receives medical supplies from the United States of America. Bill Clinton makes a slingshot. Ulysses S. Grant chases Andrew Jackson. John Adams receives fresh food from an unknown sponsor, or from the United States of America. George H.W. Bush makes a wooden spear. William McKinley picks flowers. Barack Obama goes hunting. Benjamin Harrison sprains his ankle while running away from Dwight D. Eisenhower. Warren G. Harding steals from Andrew Johnson while he isn't looking. Joe Biden injures himself. He slipped down the stairs to the plane again. Lee Harvey Oswald tries to spearfish with a trident. George Washington thinks about home. Benjamin Franklin receives an explosive from the United States of America. Harry S. Truman tries to sleep throughout the entire day. Millard Fillmore receives fresh food from an unknown sponsor. John Tyler, Woodrow Wilson, James Buchanan, and James Knox Polk raid Herbert Hoover's camp while he is hunting. Rutherford B. Hayes stalks John Quincy Adams. Donald Trump receives an explosive from the United States of America. Zachary Taylor practices his archery. Lyndon B. Johnson overhears Theodore Roosevelt and Grover Cleveland talking in the distance. Both James A. Garfield and Calvin Coolidge received an explosive from the United States of America. And Chester Alan Arthur discovers a river.
Never downloaded Battlefield 1.
It didn't?
I never did it. I just completely forgot.
You suck. We're
You
doing
suck.
the presidents.
Martin Van...
Man, sure that is original and zany.
Yeah.
After you said they couldn't be done.
It's
Martin
being
Van
done.
Buren and Jimmy Carter are dead.
Where's Teddy Roosevelt? Who cares about Jimmy Carter?
James Knox Polk questions his sanity. Harry S. Truman destroys James Buchanan's supplies
Mr.
while he's
Warden.
asleep. Donald Trump and Millard Fillmore run into each other and decide to truce for the night. James Monroe is unable to start a fire and seems
Where's
like
Warren Harding?
Joe Biden screams for help. Andrew Jackson lets Andrew Johnson into his shelter. James
Bad
A.
question.
Garfield screams for help. Zachary Taylor, Theodore Roosevelt, and Lyndon B. Johnson cheerfully sing songs together. Woodrow Wilson tends to John Tyler's wounds. Ulysses S. Grant thinks about home. Benjamin Harrison repeatedly stabs Benjamin Franklin to death with sighs.
Good.
Bill Clinton and Chester
Benjamin
Allen...
Franklin was never a president.
Yeah, but we needed people to fill
We
the
needed
slots. There's
3
not
more to
48
finish the
presidents.
list, so I put in Lee Harvey
How
Oswald,
many-
John Wilkes Booth, and Benjamin Franklin.
How many presidents are there?
45.
Think about states. How silly.
Yeah.
Whereas Bill Clinton and Chester Alan Arthur talk about the tributes still alive. Lee Harvey Oswald and Dwight D. Eisenhower hold hands. Rutherford B. Hayes, John Adams, and Warren G. Harding sleep in shifts. Calvin Coolidge attempts to climb a tree but falls on Barack Obama, killing them both. Grover Cleveland and John Quincy Adams talk about the tribute still alive. George H.W. Bush screams for help. William McKinley loses sight of where he is. George Washington receives an explosive from the United States of America. And Herbert Hoover sees a fire but stays hidden.
Albert.
What the fuck?
What happened?
George Washington, Lee Harvey Oswald, Herbert Hoover, and Ulysses S. Grant form a suicide pact, killing themselves.
Oh.
Woodrow Wilson, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, and Donald Trump raid John Adams' camp while he is hunting. Warren G. Harding tries to sleep through the entire day. Zachary Taylor sees smoke rising in the distance but decides not to investigate. Theodore Roosevelt chases Rutherford B. Hayes. Andrew Jackson makes a slingshot. William McKinley diverts Grover Cleveland's attention and runs away. George H.W. Bush injures himself. Harry S. Truman, Millard Fillmore, James A. Garfield, and John Quincy Adams raids Chester Alan Arthur's camp while he is hunting. James Monroe makes a wooden spear. John Tyler attempts to climb a tree but falls to his death. James Knox Polk travels to higher ground. Bill Clinton and Benjamin Harrison hunt for other tributes. Dwight D. Eisenhower receives an explosive from the United States of America. They're all receiving explosives.
The United States loves bombing.
Yep. Joe Biden bashes Lyndon B. Johnson's head in with a mace. Alright, it's Benjamin Franklin, Calvin Coolidge, Barack Obama, George Washington, Lee Harvey Oswald, Herbert Hoover, Ulysses S. Grant, John Tyler, and Lyndon B. Johnson are dead.
Yeah.
John Quincy Adams taints Joe Biden's food, killing him. Dwight D. Eisenhower defeats James A. Garfield in a fight but spares his life. Benjamin Harrison, Harry S. Truman, and Andrew Jackson sleep in shifts. William McKinley tends to Chester Alan Arthur's wounds. John Adams quietly hums. James Knox Polk thinks about home. Grover Cleveland, Warren G. Harding, and Andrew Johnson discuss the games, what might happen in the morning. Millard Fillmore receives a hatchet from the United States of America. Theodore Roosevelt climbs a tree to rest. Bill Clinton convinces George H.W. Bush to snuggle with him. Woodrow Wilson tries to treat his infection. James Monroe kills Rutherford B. Hayes as he tries to run. Zachary Taylor and Donald Trump tell stories about themselves to each other, and James Buchanan stays awake all night. John Quincy Adams decapitates Bill Clinton with a sword. Dwight D. Eisenhower overhears Grover Cleveland and Andrew Jackson talking in the distance. Zachary Taylor stabs James Buchanan in the back with a trident. Donald Trump makes a slingshot. Woodrow Wilson camouflages himself in the bushes. Chester Alan Arthur, James A. Garfield, Harry S. Truman, and Andrew Jackson raid Benjamin Harrison's camp while he is hunting. Millard Fillmore searches for firewood. George H.W. Bush explores the arena. James Knox Polk steals from William McKinley while he isn't looking. James Monroe questions his sanity. Warren G. Harding diverts Theodore Roosevelt's attention and runs away. And John Adams accidentally steps on a landmine.
No.
Joe Biden, Rutherford B. Hayes, Bill Clinton, James Buchanan, and John Adams are dead. George H.W. Bush kills Harry S. Truman for supplies. Andrew Johnson receives another explosive from the United States of America. Donald Trump climbs a tree to rest. James A. Garfield begs for Millard Fillmore to kill him. He refuses, keeping James A. Garfield alive. Dwight D. Eisenhower and Warren G. Harding tell stories about themselves to each other. Benjamin Harrison receives an explosive from the United States of America. James Knox Polk stabs William McKinley with a tree branch. Theodore Roosevelt kills Chester Alan Arthur with his own weapon. John Quincy Adams sets an explosive off, killing Grover Cleveland, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, and Zachary Taylor.
No.
And Woodrow
Andrew
Wilson
Jackson's
attempts to
my
start a
favorite
fire,
actor.
but is unsuccessful. What?
Andrew Jackson's dead. He was my favorite
Yeah.
actor.
The cornucopia is replenished with food supplies, weapons, and memoirs from the tribute's families. Benjamin Harrison and George H.W. Bush work together to drown John Quincy Adams.
Yay.
Millard Fillmore kills Theodore Roosevelt with a hatchet. Andrew Johnson, James A. Garfield, Warren G. Harding, and Donald Trump decide not to go to the feast. Woodrow Wilson stabs Dwight D. Eisenhower with a branch, and James Knox Polk falls into a frozen lake and drowns. James A. Garfield searches for firewood. Woodrow Wilson begs for Warren G. Harding to kill him. He refuses, keeping Woodrow Wilson alive. Andrew Johnson pushes Benjamin Harrison off a cliff during a knife fight.
Damn.
George H.W. Bush sprains his ankle running away from Millard Fillmore, and Donald Trump accidentally steps on a landmine.
Classic.
Harry S. Truman, William McKinley, Chester Alan Arthur, Grover Cleveland, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Zachary Taylor, John Quincy Adams, Theodore Roosevelt, Dwight D. Eisenhower, James Knox Polk, Benjamin Harrison, and Donald Trump are dead.
They are.
George H.W. Bush bleeds out due to untreated injuries. Andrew Johnson tries to treat his infection. Warren G. Harding is awoken by nightmares. Woodrow Wilson, Millard Fillmore, and James A. Garfield discuss the games and what might happen in the morning. Warren G. Harding and Millard Fillmore hunt for the tributes. Woodrow Wilson camouflages himself in the bushes. Andrew Johnson receives a hatchet from the United States of America, and James A. Garfield explores the arena. So only George H.W. Bush is dead. Millard Fillmore thinks about home. Woodrow Wilson tends to his wounds. Warren G. Harding receives a hatchet from the United States of America. James A. Garfield cooks his food before putting his fire out, and Andrew Johnson cries himself to sleep. Warren G. Harding receives medical supplies from the United States of America. Andrew Johnson collects fruit from a tree. Millard Fillmore and Woodrow Wilson work together for the day. James A. Garfield falls into a frozen lake and drowns. So only James A. Garfield is dead. Woodrow Wilson climbs a tree to rest. Andrew Johnson starts a fire. Millard Fillmore convinces Warren G. Harding to not kill him, only to kill him instead. Andrew Johnson tries to sleep through the entire day. Millard Fillmore constructs a shack, and Woodrow Wilson sees smoke rising in the distance but decides not to investigate. Only Warren G. Harding is dead. Andrew Johnson stays awake all night. Woodrow Wilson receives medical supplies from an unknown sponsor, and Millard Fillmore dies trying to escape the arena. It is now between Andrew Johnson and Woodrow Wilson.
I don't know who those people are.
Woodrow Wilson kills Andrew Johnson while he is resting.
Cool, I don't know who that is.
He led us in World War I believe.
Oh, cool.